The heat hit him before he even saw it. Sparks flew from the damaged machinery, and molten metal hissed as it spilled across the floor. Jalen wiped sweat from his forehead and adjusted the goggles perched on his head. The engine bay of the mining station was a mess: broken cables, twisted metal, and a small fire creeping toward the storage area. Normally he would have called for help, but something made him pause. A small, high-pitched sound reached him over the roar of the flames. It was a cry, sharp, scared, and unmistakably alive. Jalen frowned, scanning the area. At first he saw nothing. Then, in a corner where the metal walls bent toward the floor, he saw it, a tiny dragon hatchling. Its scales shimmered faintly like liquid silver, even in the dim light, and its big round eyes were wet with tears. The little creature trembled, smoke curling around its small body. Most people would have stepped back. Dragons were dangerous, even young ones. The station authorities had warned the staff about them countless times. They were not pets. They were not animals. They were fire-breathing, fast-growing predators that could destroy everything in seconds. But Jalen didn't step back. Something inside him wouldn't let him. The hatchling let out another squeak, smaller this time, and Jalen's chest tightened. Its small wings twitched helplessly. He could see the charred edges of its nest, smoldering from the sparks, and he knew it wouldn't survive alone. "Hold on," he whispered, crouching closer. "I've got you." A roar of anger came from the main control room, where the station supervisor barked orders over the intercom. "Jalen, stay back. That hatchling isn't your problem. It's going to get you killed." Jalen ignored the warning. He could hear the creature's tiny heart beating fast, and the fear in its eyes mirrored his own adrenaline. Without thinking, he lunged forward, dodging a spray of molten sparks. His boots slipped on the slick metal floor, but he grabbed the hatchling just as a burst of fire leapt from a nearby generator. The heat was intense. Jalen felt it sear his arms through his sleeves, the metal burning underfoot. The hatchling squealed, curling closer to his chest. Its tiny claws dug into his jacket, and its wings beat frantically against his shoulders. He stumbled, swearing under his breath, and used every ounce of balance he had learned from years working with machinery to keep from falling into the molten puddles. A beam above him cracked and fell with a deafening clang, scattering sparks in every direction. For a moment, Jalen thought he would be crushed. But then instinct took over. He rolled to the side, letting the beam crash to the floor just inches away. The hatchling stayed in his arms, surprisingly quiet now, its trust in him evident even in this terrifying moment. He could hear voices shouting from outside the engine bay, orders he didn't follow. He didn't care. All that mattered was getting the little dragon out alive. He spotted an opening near the back wall, a ventilation shaft wide enough to squeeze through. The flames blocked the normal exit, but this narrow path might work. He stood, wincing as a burning cable brushed against his arm, and ran toward the opening. Sparks flew around him, and the heat made his skin sting. The hatchling whimpered, pressed close to him, and Jalen whispered reassurances he wasn't sure it could understand. "Almost there, just a little more, we'll be safe." The last few meters were the hardest. The fire roared like a living thing, flames licking toward them as if they could sense their escape. Jalen gritted his teeth and pushed forward, using his shoulder to shove debris aside. He could feel sweat pouring down his face, his arms shaking from the strain. But the hatchling stayed alive, and that kept him going. Finally he reached the vent. It was narrow but just big enough for both of them. He took a deep breath, looked down at the small silver eyes staring up at him, and crawled inside. The heat pressed against his back as the flames threatened to reach him, but he kept moving inch by inch until they both emerged on the other side. Jalen collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. The hatchling curled into his chest, exhausted but safe. He looked at it, really looked at it, and for the first time he noticed the faint glow along its scales. It pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat, and Jalen felt something stir in his chest, a connection he couldn't explain. "You're going to be okay," he said softly. "I promise." For a moment the station seemed far away. The alarms, the shouting, the fire, all of it faded. It was just him and the hatchling, alive against the odds. And though he didn't know it yet, that tiny, trembling dragon had already chosen him. Jalen didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. Jalen woke to a soft, greenish light. His head throbbed, and the room smelled faintly of ozone and metal. He blinked and realized he was lying on a smooth metal table. Panels above him hummed softly, and machines ticked quietly, almost like they were alive. He tried to move, but his arms felt heavy. Something had happened. He remembered the fire, the hatchling, the molten metal, and then, nothing. A shadow moved at the edge of the light. A tall figure stepped forward, thin and covered in a metallic suit. Its eyes glowed faintly, and when it spoke, its voice was calm but firm. "You are fortunate to be alive, human." I survived," Jalen croaked, sitting up slowly. His chest ached, his arms burned, but he felt a strange energy coursing through him, like electricity just beneath his skin. "What happened?" "You leapt into the fire for the hatchling," the figure said. "We observed. The dragon chose you, and it marked you." Jalen frowned. "Marked me?" He looked down at his arms. At first they seemed normal, but then he noticed faint lines, glowing faintly in a pattern he didn't recognize. They curved and twisted along his skin like flowing rivers of silver light. He touched them, and a warm pulse traveled through his fingers. His chest skipped a beat. "The markings are recognition," the figure explained. "They connect you to the dragon. You can feel its presence, its thoughts, even its fear. Few humans have ever been marked. Most die before the bond completes." Jalen's heart raced. "I can feel it?" He closed his eyes and focused. At first all he sensed was fear and confusion. Then gradually he felt warmth, a small, trembling pulse. The hatchling curled against his chest, eyes still wide and shining. A small spark of understanding flickered in his mind. The dragon wasn't just a creature. It was aware, intelligent, and it had reached out to him. A sudden beep made Jalen start. A panel on the wall lit up, displaying a diagram of the station. Fire still raged in the engine bay, but now it seemed distant. His focus snapped back to the hatchling. It made a soft chirping sound, and for the first time Jalen heard it, not just as noise but as a pattern, a rhythm almost like words. He couldn't understand fully, but the meaning was clear. "Safe. Thank you." The tall figure watched silently. "The bond is new. It will grow, and so will your abilities. But be warned, others will fear you. Some will try to study you. Some will try to control you. The dragons are ancient, and humans are unpredictable." Jalen swallowed hard. Fear mixed with pride. No one had ever done what he had done, and yet the weight of the markings made him uneasy. He touched the hatchling's tiny head gently. "I just wanted you safe," he said softly. The hatchling nudged his hand, pressing against him. The glow in its scales pulsed stronger. For a brief moment, Jalen felt something he couldn't explain, like the dragon was looking into him, judging him, and accepting him all at once. "You are chosen," the figure said, almost as if reading his thoughts. "But choice brings responsibility. You will not be the same after this. Humans rarely are." Jalen nodded slowly. He thought about the fire, the danger, and the moment he had risked everything. Something inside him had shifted. It wasn't just courage, it was understanding, empathy, and a stubborn refusal to leave a helpless creature behind. He realized that maybe that was what the dragons valued most in humans: heart. A sudden vibration ran through his body. He jumped slightly, startled, and looked down at the markings. They pulsed in rhythm with the hatchling's heartbeat. Then he noticed something strange. He could almost see through the dragon's eyes, catch glimpses of how it sensed the world: heat, light, motion. Even the smallest shift in the air made him aware of things he never noticed before. Can I control it?" Jalen asked hesitantly, worried about doing something wrong. "Not yet," the figure replied. "The bond is mutual. You will guide, but you will also learn. Dragons do not obey. They choose. You are chosen to be their partner." Jalen exhaled slowly. The fire in the engine bay, the chaos he had just survived, felt far away now. He looked down at the hatchling, its tiny eyes reflecting the green light. For the first time he smiled. "Then let's learn together," he whispered. The room seemed quieter now, almost peaceful. The machines hummed softly as if agreeing with him. Jalen sat back, holding the hatchling close. His arms still ached, his skin burned in places, but he felt alive in a way he never had before. Something was changing inside him, and it was only the beginning. Outside, the station continued its work, unaware that a human had just crossed a line no one thought possible. Inside, Jalen and the hatchling shared a bond that would soon reshape not just their lives, but the way the galaxy saw humans entirely. And in that quiet moment, with the tiny dragon trembling in his arms, Jalen understood something incredible. Humans were not weak. They could survive fire. They could earn the trust of dragons. And maybe, just maybe, they could change the world. The days after the fire passed slowly, but Jalen never felt alone. The hatchling, small and trembling at first, had begun to grow more confident. Its silver scales shone faintly in the light, and Jalen could feel the pulsing warmth of its heartbeat whenever it curled against him. The markings on his arms glowed softly in rhythm with the dragon's energy, as if they were connected by an invisible thread. Jalen had never thought he would understand a dragon, let alone communicate with one. Yet sometimes when he focused he could sense its feelings. Fear, curiosity, hunger, even joy, they were all there. And the hatchling seemed to understand him too. When he spoke softly, it would chirp or nudge him, almost like it was answering. Life in the station continued, but not as usual. The other workers whispered behind his back. Some stared wide-eyed at the glowing markings. Others avoided him completely. They were afraid, and Jalen could not blame them. Humans were not supposed to survive dragon fire. Humans were not supposed to bond with dragons. One evening, as the station's artificial sun dimmed, alarms blared. A deep rumble shook the floors and the lights flickered. Jalen's heart raced. He ran toward the control room, the hatchling tucked safely under his arm. Screens lit up with red warnings. Rogue dragons were approaching the station from the nearby canyon. These were larger dragons, grown and aggressive, moving as if they had sensed the small hatchling. "Everyone get to the safe zones," shouted a supervisor over the intercom. But most of the staff froze, uncertain what to do. Dragons had attacked before and few humans had survived. Jalen's mind raced. He could not just hide. The hatchling depended on him and he could not let it die, not after everything. He remembered what the figure had told him. The bond was mutual. The dragons had chosen him, but he had to prove courage as much as they had. He stepped forward, leaving the other workers behind, and climbed to the top of the station's observation deck. The air was thick with heat and the scent of ozone. Below, the rogue dragons had landed, massive shapes with glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws. Their scales reflected the dim light like broken mirrors. They sniffed the air, searching. The hatchling squeaked, small but defiant. Jalen held it close, feeling the pulse of its energy. The markings on his arms brightened, responding to the danger. For a moment he felt fear, deep and cold, but then he steadied himself. He was a human, yes, smaller, weaker than these beasts, but he had something they did not: ingenuity. And he had heart. Jalen quickly scanned the control panels around him. The station's defenses were old, partially damaged in the fire. But he had an idea. Using the maintenance drones he could create a distraction. Sparks and flashing lights might confuse the larger dragons long enough to keep the hatchling safe. He worked fast, fingers moving over the panels. The hatchling nuzzled his shoulder as if encouraging him. Then he activated the drones. They whirred to life, flashing bright red lights and scattering sparks into the canyon below. The rogue dragons roared, startled and angry, their massive bodies twisting in confusion. Jalen felt the heat brush his face as one dragon leapt toward him. He ducked instinctively and the hatchling clung tightly to his chest. Another dragon's claw scraped the deck, leaving deep grooves in the metal. But Jalen did not run. He remembered the fire, the molten metal, the moment he had risked his life before. He could do it again. With a steady hand he manipulated the drones further, guiding them to create a barrier of light and noise. The dragons hesitated, circling, unsure where the threat came from. Jalen focused, feeling the bond with the hatchling strengthen. He could sense its courage flowing into him, steadying his hands, sharpening his mind. Finally the rogue dragons backed away, confused and frustrated. They roared one last time, then turned and flew back toward the canyon. The station shook as the last of them disappeared into the distance. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of the drones and Jalen's heavy breathing. The workers came out of hiding, staring at him. Some clapped, some whispered, some simply stared. He held the hatchling close and looked at his arms. The markings glowed brighter than ever, pulsing with energy and life. He had not just survived the fire, he had saved the hatchling again. And in doing so, he had shown everyone something important. Humans were capable of courage, even in the face of creatures far stronger than themselves. Jalen looked down at the small dragon, now quiet and calm. "We did it," he whispered. "We're stronger together." The hatchling chirped, a tiny sound that seemed full of pride. In that moment, Jalen realized something extraordinary. It was not brute strength that made humans special. It was the heart, the will to act, the choice to protect others even when the odds were against them. Dragons may have had fire, wings and size, but humans had courage, cleverness and the ability to care. And the bond he shared with the hatchling was only growing. The rogue dragons were gone, but their challenge had proven one thing: humans could rise to meet dragons, not by matching their power but by showing something the dragons had never expected. For the first time Jalen felt a deep certainty. The hatchling was not just a creature in need of protection. It was a partner. And together they were going to change everything. The station was quiet again, the danger past, but Jalen knew this was only the beginning. There were bigger dragons out there, stronger and wiser, waiting. And soon he would face them all, not alone, but with the small dragon at his side, and the glowing bond marking him as more than just human. After the attack by the rogue dragons, the station was quieter than ever. Most of the workers avoided Jalen now. Some whispered stories about the human marked by dragons, while others simply stared at the glowing lines on his arms. He didn't mind. He had more important things to think about: training with the hatchling, learning to understand its mind, and preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. The hatchling had grown slightly stronger since the fire. Its wings were firmer, its claws sharper, and its tiny flame flickered with confidence. Jalen had begun to sense its thoughts more clearly. It was curious, playful, and surprisingly clever. Sometimes, it would nudge him toward parts of the station that needed repair, as if it knew he could fix things no one else could. One morning, alarms blared again. Jalen froze, but this time the sound was different. It was not an attack warning, it was a message from outside the station, transmitted across long-range channels. A dragon ship hovered above the canyon, sleek and enormous, its scales reflecting sunlight like mirrors. Jalen's pulse quickened. The message was simple but clear: the dragons had noticed. He climbed to the observation deck with the hatchling clinging to his shoulder. The massive dragon in the sky tilted its head, then dipped lower, hovering above the station. Its eyes glowed faintly, and Jalen could feel it in his chest, a pulse in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Recognition. Respect. Acceptance. They're here for me, he whispered. The hatchling chirped softly in agreement, pressing close to him. The station workers crowded near the windows, gasping and pointing. Is that a dragon? One muttered. It's enormous. Yes, Jalen said quietly, and it's looking for me. The dragon's roar was not one of anger, but of acknowledgement. It circled once, then dipped closer, careful not to touch the station but close enough that its presence pressed against Jalen like a living wave. His markings glowed brighter, and he realized they were responding to the dragon, communicating without words. The hatchling chirped, and for a moment, both dragons seemed to recognize each other. Then, with a flap of its massive wings, the older dragon landed near the edge of the canyon. Smaller dragons began to emerge from behind rocks and cliffs, each observing Jalen and the hatchling with cautious interest. Jalen swallowed. He had expected fear, maybe aggression. But what he felt instead was something new: respect. The dragons did not see him as prey. They saw him as something else. A human who had risked everything for another, who had acted with courage, care, and quick thinking. A human worthy of recognition. The station's supervisor ran up to Jalen. Get back. Don't approach them, he shouted. But Jalen shook his head. He did not need words. He could feel the dragon's energy, the way they sensed his intentions. They would not attack, not now. He stepped closer to the edge of the observation deck, holding the hatchling carefully. The markings on his arms pulsed like living fire. Then, the largest dragon lowered its head, and for the first time, Jalen felt a direct connection. Thoughts, emotions, and understanding flowed into his mind, not as words but as pure feeling. The dragon's message was simple: you are one of us. You are marked. You are trusted. The hatchling chirped and nuzzled his chest. Jalen laughed softly, a mixture of awe and disbelief. He looked at the smaller dragons, then at the massive one in front of him. I don't fully understand yet, he said aloud. But I will. I promise. We will work together. The massive dragon's wings stretched wide, then it lifted into the air. The smaller dragons followed, circling Jalen and the hatchling before retreating into the canyon. The message was clear: the dragons recognized him. The humans had been underestimated for too long, but this small act of courage, leaping into fire for the hatchling, had changed everything. Back in the station, whispers spread quickly. Workers no longer avoided him, they stared in awe. Some came closer, hesitant but curious. He survived fire? One asked. Jalen nodded. I did more than survive, he said quietly. I protected someone who couldn't protect themselves. That's all it takes to earn respect. The hatchling chirped in agreement, its tiny wings fluttering. It had grown bolder, more confident, and now it walked proudly beside him. Jalen realized something important. The bond he shared with the hatchling and the recognition from the dragons was not just about power. It was about heart. Humans might be smaller, slower, or weaker than dragons, but courage and empathy could make them legendary. That night, Jalen sat alone in the workshop, the hatchling curled on his shoulder. He traced the glowing lines on his arms with his fingers, feeling the pulse of the markings. They were alive, tied to the dragons, tied to him. A quiet excitement filled his chest. He was no longer just a human mechanic. He was a bridge between humans and dragons. A symbol that humans could rise, not through brute strength but through heart and courage. And somewhere in the canyon the dragons watched. They waited, curious and respectful, knowing that the humans were no longer the weak, fragile creatures they had once dismissed. Jalen had proven that humanity could stand tall. That humanity could earn the trust of dragons. And in the silence of that night he made a quiet promise. He would not let this bond fade. He would learn, grow and face whatever dragons, or dangers, the galaxy sent next. Humans had been underestimated for too long. Now it was time to show them what courage truly looked like. The sky over the canyon burned with color as the sun rose, painting the massive cliffs in gold and crimson. Jalen stood at the edge of the station's observation deck, the hatchling perched confidently on his shoulder. Its silver scales shimmered in the morning light, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the markings on Jalen's arms. Today was different. Today the galaxy would witness what a human could do. Word had spread quickly. Humans across nearby colonies spoke in whispers of the mechanic who survived dragon fire, who earned the trust of dragons and who now carried their mark. Some doubted the story, others feared it, but all knew one thing: humans had changed. The ground trembled beneath his boots. Jalen looked down at the canyon and saw movement, massive shadows rising from the cliffs. It was a dragon larger than any he had ever seen. Its scales were dark and jagged, streaked with hints of fire, and its eyes glowed red with anger. Rogue AI forces had corrupted it, turning a noble dragon into a weapon of destruction. Its arrival could destroy the station and everything around it. Jalen's heart beat faster, but he did not falter. He held the hatchling close, feeling the bond pulse stronger than ever. The markings on his arms glowed bright silver, almost as if feeding on his determination. He understood now. The dragons had given him a gift, a connection that went beyond survival. It was trust, recognition, and the power to stand with them. The massive dragon roared, flames licking the air, and the smaller hatchling screeched in response. Jalen felt its fear, but also its courage. He whispered softly, steadying himself. "We can do this. Together." He ran toward the hangar where old mining drones and machinery were stored. There was no time for hesitation. He climbed into one of the larger maintenance robots, a mechanical exosuit designed for heavy lifting. Normally, it could barely hold him steady, but with the dragon's energy pulsing through him, he felt light, agile, almost unstoppable. The rogue dragon swooped low, smashing debris around the hangar. Jalen ducked under a swinging claw, feeling the heat brush his face. Sparks flew, but he focused, listening to the hatchling. Its thoughts guided him, showing where the dragon was weak, where it moved slower, and how it predicted the human movements. The bond was stronger than anything he had ever known. With a surge of courage, Jalen activated the robot's hydraulic arms, swinging massive chains to block the dragon's path. It roared in frustration, circling, but the hatchling chirped sharply, and Jalen felt a flash of understanding. The dragon could be outsmarted, not by brute strength but by timing and connection. He lured the rogue dragon toward the canyon's edge, dodging fire and claws with precise movements. The hatchling's guidance was perfect, small shifts and nudges telling him exactly where to go. When the dragon lunged for him, Jalen leapt, using the exosuit's boosters to fly up and over it. The rogue dragon slammed into the canyon wall, momentarily stunned. Jalen pressed forward, climbing onto the dragon's back with the hatchling clinging tightly. It roared in fury, but the markings on Jalen's arms pulsed brighter, and he felt the dragon's anger beginning to shift. He reached into the connection not with weapons but with understanding. He whispered, "I'm not your enemy. I can help you." For the first time the rogue dragon hesitated. The energy flowing between Jalen, the hatchling, and the massive dragon began to align. The fire that threatened destruction dimmed, replaced with a glowing pulse that spread through the rogue dragon's body. Slowly, it lowered its head, allowing Jalen to stabilize. The hatchling chirped proudly. Jalen patted its scales, smiling. Humans might have been small and fragile, but this moment proved something larger. Heart, courage, and intelligence could triumph even over the greatest beasts. The rogue dragon, once corrupted, now trusted him, sensing the bond that no weapon could break. Back at the station, humans watched from a safe distance, eyes wide with awe. They saw the mechanic, the hatchling, and the massive dragon standing together, flames and light weaving in harmony rather than destruction. The galaxy would remember this day. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were partners, leaders, and equals in a world that once feared them. Jalen looked at the markings on his arms, glowing stronger than ever. They were not just scars or symbols, they were proof of trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond between human and dragon. He felt pride not just for himself, but for all humans who had been underestimated for too long. The hatchling chirped and nuzzled his chest. "We did it," Jalen whispered. "Together we can face anything." And as the sun rose fully over the canyon, the dragons spread their wings, flying in unison with Jalen standing proud among them. Humans had earned their place. Humans had proven that courage, heart, and ingenuity could challenge the impossible. And for the first time, the galaxy truly saw what humans could become. Jalen smiled, feeling the pulse of the dragon's energy, the warmth of the hatchling against him, and the glow of his markings. They would never fade. They were a legacy, a mark of what a human could achieve when they chose to leap into fire, not for glory but for compassion. And in that moment, Jalen understood the truth that would echo across the stars. Humans were not just survivors. Humans were heroes.